Hi everyone, good afternoon. Danny Doyle here from AccessPay, and thank you for tuning into this version of the AccessPay podcast. I'm joined today by Jack Clancy and Jesper Frederiksen. My name's Danny Doyle. I look after the product team at AccessPay. Jack, would you like to introduce yourself for our audience?
Yeah, so my name's Jack Clancy. I'm the head of professional services at AccessPay, looking after all aspects of client delivery from implementation support and customer success.
Thank you. And Jesper, I understand you do something very, very similar.
I do, yeah. So I'm a partner and delivery director at the Digital Architect Group. So I oversee the delivery of finance projects and also oversee our roadmap for our internally developed products.
Excellent. So, yeah. Thanks, Jesper. And so the reason we've got you guys on today, we're going to have a nice little chat about delivery implementations and ERPs and getting ERPs talking to each other. So I guess to kick us off, really, Jesper, do you want to tell us a little bit about what Digital Architect Group do, why you're a partner with AccessPay, and really why we've got you on this episode of the podcast?
Absolutely. So Digital Architect Group is a fairly new Microsoft partner, and we have two branches within the company that we focus on. The first one being basically standard project delivery of ERP and finance projects, and then the second bit, which is obviously why we have connected and we know each other, is the fact that we also develop integration products for Microsoft's ERP system. And one of those integration products is basically a standard integration with the AccessPay platform, both for the payment side and the treasury side. And then that is actually a part of a larger ecosystem of products that we offer to Dynamics clients.
Cool. And Jack, what really brought this sort of partnership about? Why was there a need for ourselves and DAG to work together?
I think at AccessPay, what we offer in terms of the kind of direct to bank integration for payments and also the retrieval of cash management and treasury messages, our platform. It offers people a flexible solution to meet their different requirements with one endpoint. And I think with the partnership with the Digital Architects Group is what Jesper and the team are showing is that they can take what we have built and get it out there to a wider audience through the Dynamics 365 ecosystem they're creating.
Yeah. And why is it necessary, Jack? I mean, one of the great quotes we had from early on in the early days of AccessPay was a finance director who said, "What the hell? I didn't realize this ERP doesn't talk to my bank."
Well, I think that's a perfect quote, and it's something that will always come back up again. Yeah. People can spend a lot of money on these ERPs, TMS, whatever systems they have, and they get to a point when they realize that actually we've got so much automation and secure processes, but then we're having to manually key in or manually upload payment information or download statement information from our online banking channel. So it's important that they can turn to someone who's got a secure automated channel to do that.
Why has there been such a laser focus, Jesper, in the past on the system itself rather than the connectivity? Because we see it with Microsoft, we see it with SAP, we see it with Oracle, we see it with every ERP you'll ever come across, and Jack's mentioned the same with treasury management systems, payroll systems, all the rest of it. Why is it this sort of moat that sits around an ERP has never been secured before? Why is it that people just don't get these connections out of the box?
So, I mean, I think it's more of an industry problem because creating an out-of-the-box integration is almost impossible without a kind of a gateway solution like AccessPay. Because if you look at the various bank providers around the world, every single one of them, they obviously have their own way of connecting. They have their own formats. Even within the same bank provider, you'd find that from country to country, the formats, they differ. And they also happen to change year over year. So it's impossible unless you use a gateway like AccessPay, which would then allow us, for example, to create one specific integration to that gateway, and that's really also what is allowing us to standardize the integration. And then basically AccessPay would then does all of the heavy lifting around maintaining all of the formats, creating a unified portal where you can get your global views of your various balances, and where you can also manage the payments to various accounts. But yeah, it's simply just because of the vast amount of formats that needs to be maintained that you can't. And obviously in the industry there are so-called standards. So on the bank statements you have you have MT940s. It's more of a framework than it's a standard, because that obviously differs in the use bank by bank. And
I think we like to call that the non-standard standard.
It's the exact same thing on the payment side. So obviously there's been a lot of really good initiatives that's been, which has gone live over the last few years. I think the one people would know the most is open banking. But even that doesn't fully standardize integrations to banks, and not all banks they are using that solution. So that's not a something that would enable an ERP system to provide an out-of-the-box integration with bank portals. So AccessPay and the likes are very much needed in our world to create a very coherent process end-to-end for the users.
And what made you laugh there, Jack? What was it about the word standard? Is it that standard is more sometimes an aspiration or a hope than a real thing?
Yeah, 100%. As Jesper was saying, it's, they say there's a standard, or there's been a common implementation of a messaging standard, but a country may interpret that in a different way. A bank may take that standard and go, yes, we're going to meet this. However, we're going to put our own very slight spin on it, or they may ask for information in a different place. And, I've worked on global implementations of payment solutions for some customers, and, North America is different to Europe. Europe's different to the Middle East. The Middle East is different to the Asia Pacific. And, it's having someone in the middle who understands those nuances and who can, as Jesper says, give him a standardized access to those different countries and banks. It's massively important.
What does that actually mean for the customer, though, Jack? Because obviously we three of us are speaking very effusively about integration standards. That's because it pays our bills, right? Customers in many respects don't care. They just want the end product. So what does that kind of mean? Should a customer care? Should a customer outsource the problem to ourselves? And yes, but what does it actually mean for the customer? What's the outcome for them?
Well, I think from the customer's perspective, they don't have to manage or analyze and review specifications from these banks, 900 line specification documents. Somebody takes care of that for them, which is huge, because if you're, your standard corporate customer or a large corporate customer, do you have a payments consultant who understands that? Do you have an ERP consultant who is readily available to put in 3 weeks work to do that? If you do, great. But if not, there is someone that's needed, and that is what we can offer.
It's fair to say most don't have that expertise readily available, isn't it?
No.
And then your clients, they would also get the guarantee if they are, let's say it's an acquisition heavy client, right? When they go out and they acquire a new business, they can actually roll that business into their existing systems, knowing that the whole banking and payment part will just flow, because they already have that gateway solution that does all of the heavy lifting. Another example that I've seen quite a lot is actually in the renewable energy sector, where they have a very particular way of going around their projects, which are obviously dotted around the world. but every project would typically be made up of a number of legal entities. So even a fairly small company can have hundreds of companies with bank accounts around the world. And if you're only, let's just say you're 200 or 300 employees, having that internal capability to then manage those bank formats around the world is just not something to do, unless you choose to go down a manual route. Which these days it's just, it just has a huge overcost. And
well, it's an interesting point, I think, because you mentioned people who are into acquisitions or these kind of renewable energy sectors. What options do they have? Do they try and go on a kind of global bank consolidation exercise where they try and get as many of their the countries with one bank? Do they have the time to do that, or do they come to a provider who can give them a quick direct connection to their existing banking partners? I think it's probably something that we have seen with a number of our customers.
I think there's no clear-cut answer there. I think consolidating your accounts globally should always be a priority if you have that kind of footprint. But reality is also just that, I don't know, it can be because of some specifics in the market. It can be down to some contractual stuff that sometimes you just can't consolidate your accounts. So
it's also circular, isn't it, right? If you go through this process, if you are an acquisitive company, though, you can rationalize as much as you want. As soon as you acquire another firm, you're going to get that problem again, another ERP, another couple of banks. So you've mentioned a couple of points there, and I'm wondering which one to pick up on. First of all, I think, Jack, it's probably fair to say that this problem doesn't just exist in the multi-jurisdictional, multinational. It's not just your Coca-Colas and your BPs that have this problem, isn't it? I mean, we and we've got some mutual customers as well that just actually have one bank, don't they? I mean, how can you tell us a little bit about some of the sort of successes or, I guess, business cases for people looking at an integrated solution, even if they don't have this vast banking estate?
Well, I think one of the main things is efficiency, right? If a customer has if a client or a corporate customer has a process where they have to manually type something into an online banking channel, there's the different approval processes that come with that, and it can take 3 or 4 people to process a single payment, and that time that it takes to do that could be minutes, hours, or days if somebody's not around to approve a file. But with a direct to bank connection or using an integration partner directly from your ERP, you get the ability to achieve straight through processing with the right level of testing in advance. You can be certain that connection is working, it's efficient, and it's secure. And I think that's what everybody kind of is the step to what does good look like: secure, efficient, automated processes. So that's the journey Jesper and AccessPay want to take our customers on.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the reasons that we focus so heavily on getting AccessPay rolled in as a solution that we support, because there's this nice scalability built into the product, right? Where even a smaller enterprise can roll onto the platform and use AccessPay as a gateway that just sits in the background and directs the files and processes them, and they do everything from within the ERP system. And then as they grow and scale up, then if needed, additional components from the AccessPay platform could be taken into use. And if you get a dedicated treasury function, then that whole business function could be moved into AccessPay.
Mm-hmm. I think
there's a lot of flexibility there that we really like.
I think that's something that's a really good point, actually. If we look at the kind of the journey AccessPay's been on and some of our customers have been on, what you begin to understand is that the level of access and automation people can achieve now with technology providers such as ourselves and Digital Architects Group is something that was traditionally reserved for those big corporate companies you previously mentioned, Danny, and spending six figures on a huge ERP installation. People can now achieve that same level of secure, efficient processing for a more competitive cost. So it's almost like there's a leveling of the playing field with democratizing the access to this kind of automation.
Yeah, And that's a wider trend, isn't it? Obviously, I think as things have moved to cloud, there's been this, why do I need servers anymore? Why do I need to, why do I need to manage my ERP in-house? So that's something that I think every finance listener will be familiar with, Jesper, is there is this transition to cloud, there is this commoditization of sort of SaaS and ERP products.
Yeah.
Changing tack completely. I mean, what other trends are going on in the ERP world? What should our sort of finance and IT listeners be interested in? What's the world of ERP going to look like in 5 years? What's the view from Copenhagen, as it were?
Right. So if we start off, when I started implementing ERP systems, I think 13 years ago now, then back then the saying was very much you try to create one big solution that covered the whole business. In the later years now, you've seen the ERP market as a whole. It's transforming towards what's known as a service-oriented architecture, and for the non-techies, basically what it means is we're taking more of an app-based approach now to finance systems and ERP systems. And it's that shift in the market now where integrations that we provide through our products and an AccessPay really fit well now. And so basically a client now, instead of having to go with the full solution, you would need a finance, so you get the finance module. If you need a payment processing system, then you get AccessPay, and then you just integrate it. And that's the whole service-oriented architecture. So that shift has now, it's actually meaning that the time to implement now is a lot less, and the upgrade path going forward is also protected, so they can easily upgrade to new versions. They can easily exchange components within that architecture. So that's been the main shift I've seen up until now. And then if we kind of look forward for the next 5 years, then the big thing is basically making this service-oriented architecture even easier to achieve for clients, and that's kind of the place we want to be with our products. And then obviously if we look beyond that, then we are starting to look into things like machine learning and artificial intelligence, which has reached a maturity now, and also a cost that's low enough for clients to start adopting them. But that's, it's not a new thing, but it is a new thing that fairly risk-adverse clients are starting to adopt these technologies as part of their ERP implementations. And I know AccessPay is working on some of that as well.
I think every tech company in the universe is. I guess the difference is now some of it's starting to look real. So a couple of bits really. So yes, but imagine I'm a sort of finance director, finance manager, or whatever. I'm on an ancient ERP. It's all on premise kind of. And if I listen to you talk about a service-oriented architecture or an app-based world, I mean, let's pretend I have no clue what you're talking about. I mean, what does this mean? Because we have customers that you could say that to, and they're like, I don't have a clue what you're talking about. I'm using SAP from 8 years ago, or I'm using, Dynamics from 6 years ago. Kind of, what does that mean in sort of layman's terms? What can they look forward to, and how might they sort of get there?
It means that it means that you can specify the product a lot better to the individual client without actually customizing. So it's almost a way of customizing a system without customizing, being able to pick the components that you need. So that would kind of be my way of summarizing it.
I think there's maybe some other ways to approach it as well there, Jesper, because you've mentioned the kind of picking different bits that they need, and I think what is a very important thing, especially in this day and age. We're living in a world where people are being asked to do more with less. So with this service orientated architecture, you can show a quicker time to value, because there may be certain aspects of the product they need quicker than the rest, so you can get them live on one part of the product or one app while you begin working on the next part to bring the next part of the value, the next piece of value into the puzzle. So I think from our perspective, we always try and look at things and see how best can we phase our projects so that the customer can achieve value as quick as possible. And I think that with this app-based approach, rather than one huge monolithic installation which takes 18 months to complete with 3 months of UAT, you can show value in 2, 6, 12 weeks and rather than months. So I think that's something that I found is very important in this cloud app-based world.
Absolutely, and it's one of the things that also does is that you can introduce the change that an IT transformation obviously introduces. You can introduce that gradually, which is a lot easier to manage in an organization, rather than these big bangs where basically you're ripping the carpet underneath all of the users' feet, right? You're changing their world and everything's upside down for them.
Yeah, I know what that feels like. I think we migrated one of our customers from a legacy product to the product that and yep. That was a hard cutover. It was a big bang approach, and it was painful. It was it was sleepless nights. Danny will remember the amount of effort that we put in from a product and engineering perspective to do that. And
yeah.
if we would have been at that point where we could have delivered a more app-based approach to it at that time, it would have been significantly easier. But because of the tech stack that we previously had, it wasn't as easy.
Exactly. I mean, if you can, if you can run ahead of the core finance program and make sure that the majority of your users, they are using the new banking system, they're using the new expense and timesheet system, then the amount of users where you're managing the change for basically the big product is just vastly reduced, and it's so much easier to manage, and your risk in the business is reduced a lot too.
So there's been some really interesting points there. Again, I don't know which way to go next, but I mean, you've talked about some, I guess, some implementations that have probably caused sleepless nights and some things not to do. I mean, I'll ask you both as sort of delivery professionals, what does a good ERP implementation or payment system implementation look like? What does a good buyer look like? I mean, what are all the hallmarks of a successful implementation for you, and for anyone considering it? What should they be trying to work towards? I guess I'll go to Jesper first. Sorry.
Right. So how does a good implementation look like? Like, the key thing there. Every successful project I've done, there's always been, executive sponsorship. You go out to the business, and you don't have to debate about why we do things or why we're changing things. There's full buy-in to what we're doing and changing. So to me, that's always the main thing. Then, other than that, it's also about having prepared the organization for the change that's coming. So it doesn't become a battle. It becomes a partnership instead. And we're on this journey together. Then, another clear thing is skilled resources. Unfortunately, you also see a lot of projects fail because what happens is that getting skilled resources is tough. So what you're trying to do is what a lot of partners might be trying to do is they'll try and just flood whatever's on the bench rather than spending the extra time that it might take to find the correct resources that's skilled for that particular project. Not doing that can spell the disaster as well.
How about for you, Jack? I mean, because I guess we pride ourselves on, fantastic customer satisfaction, but we'd be kidding ourselves if we said we haven't had bad implementations as well. And,
No, I think, the first point Jesper said, bang on, executive sponsorship and buy-in, that is needed, on both sides, depending on who the customer is, they need to have that project sponsor sometimes just to crack the whip and make sure things are keeping on track. often, depending on the customers we have, some will have dedicated project resource, others will not. And that's probably kind of a disaster class. If you do not have a dedicated project manager for one of these projects, there's always going to be slippage. If it's been given to someone to do in addition to their day-to-day job, people are working at capacity, and then you give them more to do, they're not going to be able to give it the attention it deserves. And as Jesper mentioned, they may not be a good project manager. They may not have the skills and experience to do that. And then I guess from my perspective, what I obviously, encourage my team to do is, always think back, are we delivering what the customer expects? Number one, the customer's bought something, so we will always review, what was agreed at the point of sale. We'll go back to the salesperson, make sure that's correct. Go back to the customer, make sure they understand the same as what we understand. And then so we can, agree all these things up front and make sure it's 100% clear in what we are working towards and what we're trying to achieve as a partner. I think that's a very key point there. It's not just a typical supplier relationship. We want to be partners with our customers because, and when we're talking about this kind of scalability, it's not just that first project, it's the second project and the third project that we will be working on. So it's making sure we're working as partners rather than a typical supplier relationship.
And yes, but it must, this was a question I wanted to ask a bit earlier on. So we talked about these large multinational, these large global rollouts and sort of IT projects. And I do want to pick you up on finance transformation in a moment, but I mean, you could give a little bit of advice to an IT director and a finance director or whatever, somebody considering or planning a global rollout of an ERP. What is that advice and what should they be considering?
Oh, so it's a tough
what a question.
Yeah. I'd say that they need to be able to clearly articulate what business challenges and benefits they are trying to achieve from starting such a project, because it's quite an endeavor to go to an IT transformation in your business, and if that's not clearly defined or articulated, then you essentially lose your compass in that whole process, and it also becomes very hard to get that executive sponsorship that you need in order to drive it correctly through. So think long and hard about what it is you're trying to achieve with this. Spend a lot of time, I'd say, on picking the right delivery partner. Obviously, I'd like to say that we can do all kinds of projects, but reality is there are delivery partners out there that specializes in certain types of companies. So spend time to look at the market and talk to the right partners, because getting into bed with the wrong person is not always a good experience.
Well, that's assuming the answer could be a little bit different then. So where do you see ERP implementations fail? Obviously, we can deduce that if you don't have the business case, if you don't have executive sponsorship, but are there any other hallmarks or characteristics of I think Jack called it a disaster class waiting to happen? Is there anything you can point to and things to avoid?
There is. So one of my main things that whenever I've been on a project that's been severely delayed and is running over cost, it's almost always because of integrations or data migration for that matter. And it comes down to the amount of stakeholders sometimes that you have to manage in an integration and the know-how your partner has. So we do our best endeavors when it comes to estimating and planning. We only know what we know. When it comes to integrations to an AccessPay or whatever else you might be integrating to, then you just don't know how those products work or how that technology looks like when you start a project. And when you to that add the complexity that you need to manage their resources as well according to your project plan, then then it becomes so complex that quite often that you end up delivering late. Because I don't know, I could be booking external resources with an external supplier for 2 days next week, because that's when we're estimating to deliver a certain bit of code for an integration. If I'm 2 days late with that, then I'm potentially already multiple weeks late with my delivery, because now I have to rebook those, and that's it. It happens so often.
Yeah,
that's also what we're trying to address now with our ecosystem. It's basically plug and play. We had all those conversations with the external suppliers, so you can actually be up and running immediately.
Yeah. And specifically on that point of data migration, I guess. So, I mean, is there anything, some finance people, some people are midway through a project might think, oh God, I've not thought about this. What am I going to do? Jesper's just told me it's going to kill my project. I mean, is there any practical advice when it comes to that sort of stuff that you can offer? Is there anything that they can do to prepare, or any processes they can avoid?
Practical advice is have dedicated resources that treats the whole data migration process as a project of its own, and ring fence time with the resources that needs to make decisions around conversion rules and all this kind of stuff. Ring fence that time up front, because when an implementation is running at full speed, checking those conversion rules and doing the data migration is going to be at the bottom of the list.
Yeah. How about you, Jack? Flipping it on its head. I don't hear data migration as a massive issue we face, but I'm sure we've got myriad issues we can point out of around what leads to a failed project or at least a severely disappointing project delivery from our side.
Yeah, I think the dates and having people in the right place at the right time. Let's think, there's going to be lots of different stakeholders, third party, maybe IT suppliers, different internal and external stakeholders. And I think, if you're relying on someone that is out of your control and, you don't have the right rigor to make sure they're doing things when they need to be, that can massively delay things. So one of the things we see quite commonly is when it comes to kind of the testing element of projects, some of our clients may not have lined up the operational resource to be ready for testing. And then you've got month end, you've got year end, you've got
audit month.
Yeah. And basically,
I'm in an ERP project, leave me alone for 6 months.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. And what we find is that, something that should take a week doesn't start for 4 weeks, and then it has to stop partway through because you've got some annual leave or sickness. And, that's kind of one of the big things for us, is that making sure our customers and our people are ready to test and available. I've seen probably the worst thing that happened was the project sponsor leave a business through a project, and then, that completely ground things to a halt. And it was, 6, 7, 8 months before it got up and running again, purely because the new incumbent, was this what he wanted to carry on doing? Was this the project for him? Did it make sense? You do get some people who join a business and they naturally want to do something completely different to the predecessor, and that has probably been the worst thing I've experienced, is that the project sponsor leave partway through projects. That was the biggest disaster class, I would say.
I suppose to Jesper's earlier point, though, right? If you've got the business case correctly disseminated and articulated, if everyone knows the why goes out the window, and surely then it's a case of let's just deliver it. I must admit, I'm not surprised to hear 2 project delivery people say, just get good project managers is the solution to everything.
Yeah.
I think we, whatever's on the top of that list for the individual person just comes down to what we have been burnt the most by individually. So it's a good question to anyone in this world, because it will immediately reveal the hardships they had.
the battle scars that they bear from previous. So I guess the final sort of question really to wrap up, and it's something slight change of tack. So I mean, for both Jack and Jesper, kind of what learnings or what lessons do you have from getting ERPs, or in the case of AccessPay, getting AccessPay to talk to other systems? Kind of, because our whole raison d'etre is, you know, we're the glue, we're the centerpiece between lots of systems on one side and lots of banks on the other. That's the world in which we inhabit. And likewise, Jesper, you've got kind of dynamics at the middle of your world, talking to lots of other applications, or at least use cases, let's say. So what kind of learnings do you have from sort of setting up that ecosystem? What are the challenges you face? And for anyone looking to get two systems that don't currently talk to each other to talk to each other, is there anything else that you can add that you could advise for anyone going on a similar journey? I will let either of you answer that first.
Well, I think I don't want to sound blunt with this, but speak to an expert. You know, if you're going out there to try and do something that's not been done before, who's the expert on the first system and who's the expert on the second system? See if you can get some advice from those people to try and understand how they can talk to one another. I think, you know, you could be banging your head against a brick wall trying to do it yourself for a long period of time, but it might be more cost effective and time effective to pay some amount of money to get the right level of consultation or the right person to come and help you achieve that.
Yeah, I'd say, yeah, speak to an expert, because I think what all experts would also say to you is never hard code. Make sure everything's configurable and can be set by a parameter, because once you hard code stuff in an integration, inadvertently, you quite often see clients do that, and the consequence is that this new system that they bought, that they are supposed to be able to upgrade and change the use of as they grow and change their business, they can't do that, because there's something in that integration now dictating you have to use it this way. So yeah, that's one of the big stumbling blocks you quite often see, is that they try to cut costs, so things are being hard coded, and down the line when you're live, it starts hurting.
Leads to a world of pain.
Yeah.
Guys, I think that's great. That's been really interesting. Really enjoyed chatting through with you both. Hopefully that's been at least moderately interesting for our listeners. For anyone who didn't have the sort of 35 minutes to sit and listen to us, if you had to summarize our conversation today with a couple of key takeaways, what would you say, Jack? First of all, for you, anyone looking to sort of implement a payments and or cash management system, what would your key takeaways be?
Really understand what you want to achieve. You know, what is the value and what are you expecting out of this project? Make sure you have that senior person in the business who is willing to put their weight behind it when needs be, and get a good project manager.
And Jesper, how about yourself? I assume you're going to agree with some or all of those, but any other sort of key takeaways from the ERP?
With all of it. But if I had to add to it, I would also say it's key to get an early view of how you want your IT landscape to look like once you're done. Because and basically creating that view early on allows you to accelerate some of these things that we talked about earlier. So, you know, maybe go ahead of an ERP implementation with implementing the payment system or other systems. But you can only do that if you know how your end state solution is roughly going to look like. So getting that perspective early on is key to making the right decisions as well.
I think you referred to it as a compass earlier, yes, which I thought was a really good way of putting it. You know, if you keep that as your true north, where are we going to end up? Constantly revisit that. Are we on track? Are we getting to where we need to? I think that applies to both system types, right, Jack?
100%, yeah. And I think it boils down to my first point. You know, what is the value you want? Are we on track? Are we obtaining that value? And I think, you know, obviously Jesper's answer was far better than mine. So mine was very blunt, but, you know, I think that kind of understanding where you want to go and where you want to end up, and kind of not deviating, avoiding scope creep, if you will, and just making sure you're tight on what those requirements are.
Yeah, but I think the important thing there is, the solution will change. Anything that runs over a long period of time is not going to be static. So that compass or that guiding arrow of where we need to end up is just so important.
Brilliant, guys. Well, thanks so much for your time,
Yeah.
and we'll end it there. Cheers.
Thank you very much. That was very enjoyable.
It's good. Thank you.